Welcome back to another episode of the Evo 6 STI Killer presented by Koyorad. Today we are yanking this engine to see what kind of carnage happened on the dyno. If you watched the last dyno video on this car, you will know it was a depressing day. We definitely had a major failure. We think the head gasket is gone. So today we're gonna rip into this and take it apart. But first of all, I wanna thank all of you that posted positive comments. I do certainly appreciate that. It was a down time, so thank you for those. What we're gonna end up doing now is, I think we gotta drain the fluids first, obviously, and then we're gonna drop this whole thing as a whole with the subframe, the gearbox intact downwards. So without further ado, I think it is time we go to the GoPro because you guys don't want to sit here and watch us having to struggle with this. We want to get this down and torn apart to see what actually happens. Deja vu all over again. Crazy to see this engine, the whole transmission and all that out again. But on the bright side, dropping the subframe did work out. It's, I think, the best way to pull an Evo engine. We did run into a few headaches. The turbo kit, everything is so tight. Like the V-band flanges actually on the wastegate tube here contact the V-band on the exhaust housing, so you like have to gotta rotate the turbo a little bit. It's just so tight. This is all really tight here. I spent a bunch of time frustrated with that, and for whatever reason, when we were pulling the bolt and nut off of the suspension, the coilover, it cross-threaded itself and then ended up chewing itself up. Like, look at the mangling that this did there. It was insane. All of a sudden it was just like super hard to remove, and it destroyed that. And last but not least, if you still have any doubts that we lifted the head gasket, check out our poor Koyorad. It has now ballooned itself. Unfortunately, you can imagine with that amount of pressure going through this thing, it just caused everything to balloon out. However, it did not fail, and that just goes to show the quality of a rad like this, that it will hold the pressure, and unfortunately will bow out like this because it is aluminum and whatnot, but we will have to source ourselves a new one. We can do that. So now comes the task of removing the head from the block. So we don't really want to separate all of this just yet. I'm pretty sure we will have to like tear everything apart, but I just wanted to see what the damage is. So What I think we're gonna do is take the timing belt system off, then take the valve cover off, take the cams out, loosen the head bolts, and then pull the head off as one complete unit with the exhaust manifold and the intake. And then we can kind of like look at everything, assess it, and then figure out what to do next. Oh yeah. All right, let's drop that over here. Okay. Ooh-wee. Wow, guys, there's some carnage. So there's definitely some serious damage here. Starting off on this end, you can see the majority, when we saw that flame poke through here, it had completely burnt out the gasket. It is done. Wow, what damage. And you can see number 3 took a bit of a hit. I remember seeing a bit of flame coming out this way too. So there was some action that happened here. And the other ones, I don't know, like it looks like there may have been a little bit of issue starting here and here because that coating is gone. But again, that may be because this area, when this lifts up, that's what happens. The studs here are loose. So this one in particular, like look how many turns. This one is, wow, that's a lot. In the ARP manual, it does state that that you're just supposed to put these in finger tight. You see this one has a bunch of turns in it too. And then this guy here is tight. This one here, right there. And then this one is tight. So I don't know, guys, like with these being loose like this, my feeling is maybe we should have gone through and retorqued them. I know some of you commented before and said, once you run the motor, especially with the metal head gasket, you should have retorqued the ARP studs. According to the manual, the ARP manual, it does not state you have to go back and retorque these. So, you know, it's a hard thing. Like when we looked on the internet forums, there's about several posts that talk about people retorquing these, but
or torquing to a higher spec,
or torquing to a higher spec. So, but like, are we going to take the forum, or are we going to take the instructions from ARP? So,
right.
Somebody else pointed out, I think it was Andre from HP Academy, mentioned that we use an Evo 8-9 head gasket, but and there may be slight differences in it. But after looking at here, like it does look like all the coolant lines, the holes line up. This one here is just a little bit off, but still, it looks like it's
yeah, and JE does list this as a Evo 4 through 8
exactly,
or 9
yeah.
fitment.
And we confirmed that. We looked at it. We thought, you know what, like let's check. And 4 to 9 seems to have the same head gasket. So now comes the moment of truth. I'm gonna take this off. It's almost like fused itself here in a couple spots. I really want to see what it looks like underneath, whether this block is completely destroyed or not. Okay, let's have a look at that. This thing is fully destroyed. It smells like burning too. Look at the shape of it here. It is just totally gone. Wowzers. That is that's a new one for me. I've never seen that before. And let's have a look here. Man, you guys are probably having a hard time seeing this because I'm looking real close, but it does not look like we have any burning or any damage here, which is nice to see. And what about out here? You can see where it broke through, right? Where we had the contact failure. Wow, this is, oh man, there's like, you can see the heat in the block. I don't know if you guys can
discoloration.
Yeah, exactly. The little blue hue here and here.
It's been forged now. It's stronger than ever.
Yeah.
Tempered this block.
So, but looking at it here, I don't see any real issues in that sense. So there it is. Look at the damage up in this area here. Man, that's a nice hole. It's almost like an explosion went off in this area right here. But the good news is This is fixable. So it's not like our combustion chamber got destroyed. Everything else, like the valves look perfect. All of this, I do not see any real damage. I'm surprised it blew out here as well, and there's does not look to be any damage there, which is nice. So in this area here, this all, yeah, these look completely fine down here. So, well, yeah, that's about the extent of the damage here. So not terrible. I was expecting worse. That isn't a bad deal. So I think what we're gonna do is take a pause here right now. We're gonna send some photos to some experts, talk to some people, and let's get back to you here on what the consensus is of what happened.
All right, guys, we took the night to consult with some Evo experts, of course, including Andre at HB Academy, as well as Pete consulting with Ronnie down at RS Motors. They are a Evo expert in the USA. And having sent them a bunch of photos of what we've got here, obviously it's very difficult for them to like diagnose the motor from a distance, but there could have been several contributing factors to why we had this head gasket failure. It is worth noting, however, that the way we saw these ARP head studs, you know, backing out a bit is normal when you remove them, when you remove the head. So that's not anything to be concerned about. So I don't think we had an issue there. Ronnie was saying that, you know, the deck surface may have had some low spots in it where you can see on the gasket it was starting to lose a seal. So it may be that because we didn't deck the block, that was a contributing factor, or maybe the sole factor. We don't know for sure. The temptation for us was, oh, by the way, here's one of the spark plugs, because we were thinking about, you know, detonation or pre-ignition being a causative factor. And you can see the porcelains are actually in really good shape. There's no like black specks or sparkly specks on them, which would indicate pre-ignition was happening. However, as we started to dig a little deeper here, we did notice there's some like lines in the bores here. You can't feel them, but they're visually there. And so when we put the pistons to top dead center, you could see just along the edge of the piston, there is some deterioration of the piston material there, as well as some like buildup of like almost like a white chalky looking material at the very top of the bores here, which we think is actually that piston material sort of melting off the piston and onto the walls here. So that could be a situation where we had too much timing in the motor and we were getting pre-ignition, and that, you know, contributed to this failure as well. Again, we don't know for sure, but
yeah, it is really hard to know, because if the head gasket lifted a bit, you know, then the detonation could have started then, or did it start before? It's so hard to know. So we're not looking to blame anybody here. We're just really looking to learn from this experience and to look, you know, dig as deep on this as we can so that we make the right decision about how to proceed from here. So like, do we reuse this motor and put clean up the deck, put a new gasket in? And by the way, we do have an OE gasket. Where did we put that? It's right here. So this is an OE gasket that came with the gasket kit that Pete bought from MA Performance. And as you can see, it's a really nice MLL gasket. So it's tempting just to like clean up the deck, drop this on here. Pete has a new cylinder head that he found locally. So we would just swap the valve train into that head, drop it on here, and we'd be back in business. And that's very, very tempting.
It is tempting because it's kind of like the quick and dirty way to get this thing back on the road and get this STI versus Evo rivalry dealt with. But now that we've noticed there is some light damage along the edge of the pistons, and you see this light bit of like marking in the bores, it's like how much load was being put into the rod bearings. It starts to introduce questions about the condition of the short block and whether we harmed the bearings or not. So it really feels like we'd be rolling the dice to throw this gasket on here, bolt the head down, and hope for the best. And we might get away with it, but we might not. It's like, do you want to go through the effort of doing that and then potentially be right back to where we started again with even more egg on our face? I don't know. I don't know if we want to do that or not. I feel like maybe that's not the right route for us. So,
well, there you have it, guys. This one is going to be a wrap. In a nutshell, we're still, 50-50 trying to figure out what to do here. Certainly post in the comments, tell us what you think we should do. We're always eager to read those. But, from my personal sentiment, I love the idea of rebuilding this engine. It's just the time factor. Getting parts right now is difficult. A lot of stuff is on back order. And the ease of going to MA Performance and just ordering a short block seems like a very, very tempting and viable option. So we're gonna take a little bit of a step back, think about this, and put a plan together, and then you will see the next video where we are either taking this apart or taking the stuff off to put a new short block on. So stay tuned for more action. Definitely give me a like and a subscribe if you're into that, and think about checking out Patreon as well.
Actually, you know what? Here's a little bonus of us reading some of the meanest, most hateful, and potentially most insightful posts from the previous episode where the motor let go. First one here is, you get what you pay for. Direct and to the point, but completely missing the mark, since we used nothing but very high quality parts on that engine build, including, JE pistons and a Pro Seal head gasket and ARP studs. So definitely not a case of getting what you pay for, unless you're referring to how much we paid ourselves to assemble the motor. Maybe that's what you meant, in which case, yeah, you might not be wrong.
All right, let's start off with this one. Next time, get the block decked. Some are badly out of spec, a problem that's highlighted using metal head gaskets. Maybe, that could very well be what happened. Thanks for the tip.
The comment is K-Swap Evo ? And believe me, I've been joking with Pete about that around the shop, because K-Swap is always the answer. And at 20 pounds of boost, a K-Swap would probably make 600 horsepower instead of the 350 that it made before it let go. So you're not wrong.
By far, my favorite comment has to be this one. There is no way you guys didn't do this on purpose for drama. You can hear knocking and the engine struggling during the pulls. Can we have some honesty here? Even a 15-year-old lube tech could tell you that thing isn't sounding right. With our 350,000 subs, we are making so much money that we figured, why not blow a motor up for drama? Because that's what you do when you have this abundance of subscribers and this abundance of view rate and all that. No, why on earth would we blow up an engine? That just makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't really understand the reasoning behind that.
One of the most frequent questions lately, and the one that annoys Pete the most, is Dave losing weight? ? And yes, I am losing weight, everyone, and it's not by choice. I'm on this weird gluten-free, dairy-free diet because my body is broken and attacking itself. So thank you for caring about my health and my weight loss, everyone.
Get a professional engine builder specific to the engine you're working on and watch what he does. Your first mistake, and one that you guys seem to keep repeating, is thinking that you can work on cars by watching online videos and other YouTube content creators. Get a pro or specialist on the vids, learn from them, and then venture into your own builds. I'm sure it will be less expensive and more rewarding experience. Wait a second. Didn't we kind of do that? We watched the HP Academy tutorials. We built the engine that way, so it seems like that was the right thing to do. But I get what you're saying. If we could hire an engine builder, take time out of their work schedule to come here to help us and watch and learn from them, that would be fantastic.
Here comes some real hate, everybody. First, he starts with the crying emoji and the crooked face crying emoji. This is what you get for letting these guys build an engine, but WTF was they thinking? Sparks, let's keep dynoing. Oh, now we blew the engine, let's keep cranking. Smiley face with tears, crooked smiley face with tears. I'm guessing English is not the first language here, but we get the point. You think it's hilarious that we blew up the motor, and I know in the video it looks like Sasha just left his foot on it after the motor blew up, or when it was sounding like it was on the verge of blowing up, but he had his knock box hearing set on. There was a lot of noise in the dyno cell, and he wasn't seeing any knock through the knock box, so that's why he stated it, and these pulls happen very quickly.
It's really embarrassing that at no point did either of you mention the fact that appropriate sensors in place would have allowed the standalone ECU to catch the problem before it ever escalated to the failure we've seen, regardless of what the failure turns out to be. Also, it was super disappointing to realize that the dyno pull in question wasn't even aborted, even though there was a series of very strange noises being heard for the very first time. I feel bad that the end result is what it is, but I feel worse knowing that the viewers were given no guidance into the available protection strategies of a modern standalone engine management system. Fair point. The reality is we did have a knock sensor, and even if that knock sensor was saying, hey, pull full timing, there's only a certain amount of timing that can be pulled. Dave mentioned Sasha did have a knock box on. The reality of this is, when you're at the dyno, it's so loud, like especially in that contained room. That car specifically, the dump pipe is pointed directly down into the ground. The noise that I heard coming out of that thing was way louder than most dump pipes I've encountered on Sasha's dyno. There was a lot of noise going on, and a hindsight in 2020, sure, maybe he should have caught it. I don't know. It's hard to know in this type of situation. Things kind of escalate very quickly. I suspect we hurt the motor before. You know, what you're watching there isn't a pull-by-pull video. There was a couple pulls beforehand that were done and everything was running normal. The same noise was coming out of the wastegate.
This is a fun one. This guy says, this is why you don't use a torque wrench. Lol, just tighten it with good reason and these things won't happen. So yes, we've had a lot of comments about torquing it to 120 foot-pounds instead of ARP's recommended 80 foot-pounds, or retorquing it after the motor goes through a heat cycle, which is something that the Evo guys seem to do with some frequency, although ARP doesn't recommend it, and a lot of the engine builders that we've spoken to also don't recommend it, although a few said, you know, make sure you torque it over and over again at 80 foot-pounds repeatedly just to make sure it's good there.
When your Evo has more head gasket issues than your STI. Funny how that happened. Of all the memes on the internet and Subarus knowing to blow their head gaskets, here we are with an Evo that melted one. Very ironic indeed.
Next comment is, I don't think we need to see the battle anymore. Clearly the Subaru is the superior car, and I can't disagree with you, but I do want to see the battle, and I'm sure everyone else wants to see the battle, so we are going to get this thing sorted out one way or the other. There will be an Evo versus STI battle. Just might be a minute.